Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
The British are coming! The British are coming!
Except, no, that is not how it went down. This was a secret mission, and yelling his warning for loyalists to hear would have undermined the whole point of secrecy. If Revere never shouted the British were coming, the colonials still thought of themselves as being British, so that wouldn't make sense at all. He said something more along the lines of, the regulars are coming.
Hey, the regulars are coming.
That's more like it. So, Paul Revere goes down in history as a true American patriot, effectively warning the people in Concord. Just kidding. Revere actually never made it to Concord. He was arrested before he could even complete his mission.
What? Wait, no, this is not how it happens. No!
King George III ramped up his military presence in Boston, and in June 1774, he shut down the city's harbor until all of the tea that was dumped into the harbor was repaid. Soon after, the British Parliament declared that Massachusetts colony was in open rebellion. British officer Thomas Gage learned Minutemen were storing guns near Boston, and John Hancock and Samuel Adams were in Lexington. The British planned to arrest the two patriots. On April 18, 1775, Joseph Warren, a physician and member of the Sons of Liberty, learned from a spy inside the British High Command that redcoat troops were marching that night on Concord. Warren dispatched two messengers that night. One was silversmith Paul Revere, and the other was a tanner, William Dawes, to alert the residents of the news that the British regulars were coming. They went by separate routes in case one of them was captured. Revere crossed the Charles River by boat to get to Charleston, while fellow patriots were waiting for a signal about the movement of the British troops. The patriots had been instructed to look at the steeple of Boston's Old North Church, which was visible to them because it was the highest point in the city. If there was one lantern hanging in the steeple, the British were arriving by land. If there were two lanterns hanging in that steeple, the British were coming by sea. Two lanterns were set out, and the secret signal was memorialized in American poet Henry Longfellow's poem, Paul Revere's Ride, in which he wrote, "One if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore would be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for all the country folk to be up and to arm." As Paul Revere carried out his mission in Charleston, Dawes left Boston and traveled along the Boston Neck Peninsula. The two met up in Lexington, a few miles east of Concord, where revolutionary leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock were in hiding. Having persuaded those two to flee, a weary Paul Revere and Dawes then set out again, this time to complete their mission in Concord. On the road, they met a third rider, Samuel Prescott, who alone made it all the way to Concord. Revere was captured by a British patrol, while Dawes was thrown from his horse and forced to proceed back to Lexington on foot. The colonists had been warned. At dawn on April 19th, some 700 British troops arrived in Lexington and came upon 77 Minutemen gathered on the town green. A British major yelled, "Throw down your arms, ye villains, ye rebels!" The heavily outnumbered Minutemen had just been ordered by their commander to disperse, when a shot rang out. This was the shot heard around the world. To this day, no one knows which side fired first. Several British volleys were subsequently unleashed before order could be restored. When the smoke cleared, 8 Minutemen lay dead and 9 were wounded, while only 1 redcoat was injured. The British then continued on their way to Concord to search for arms, not realizing that the vast majority had already been relocated. They decided to burn what little they found, and the fire got slightly out of control. Hundreds of Minutemen occupying the high ground outside Concord incorrectly thought the whole town would be torched. The Minutemen hustled to Concord's North Bridge, which was being defended by British soldiers. The British fired first, but fell back when the colonists returned the volley. After searching Concord for about 4 hours, the British prepared to return to Boston, located 18 miles away. By that time, almost 2,000 Minutemen, they're known as Minutemen for their ability to be ready on a moment's notice, had descended to the area, and more were constantly arriving. At first, the Minutemen simply followed the British column. Fighting started again soon after. However, with the Minutemen firing at British from behind trees, stone walls, houses, and sheds, before long, British troops were abandoning their weapons, their clothing, and equipment in order to run faster, all the way back to Boston. The relatively low casualties of the battles of Lexington and Concord proved the colonists could stand up to one of the most powerful armies in the world. Representatives from all the colonies would meet in Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress. They would form the Continental Army, appointing George Washington as its commander. The War for Independence has begun.
Now the ride of Paul Revere set the nation on its ear, and the shot at Lexington heard round the world. When the British fired in the early dawn, the War of Independence had begun. The die was cast, the rebel flag unfurled, and on to Concord marched the foe to seize the arsenal there, you know, waking folks, searching all around, till our militia stopped them in their tracks. At the old North Bridge we turned them back and chased those redcoats back to Boston town. And the shot heard round the world was the start of the revolution. The Minutemen were ready on the move. Take your powder, take your gun, report to General Washington. Hurry, men, there's not an hour to lose.